Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa. There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that
I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country?
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because
Pramila came in swinging with the usual script, loud claims, emotional framing, and that gotcha energy like she was about to corner someone on camera. But she picked the wrong target as Marco Rubio rips her apart. What she thought would be a takedown turned into a shutdown. Stick around.
The State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Rumeysa Öztürk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Öztürk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Öztürk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, if an op-ed, which...
She thought she had Marco Rubio cornered with a constitutional gotcha. Instead, the hearing turned into a clash between the First Amendment and immigration law, and Rubio never let the conversation leave one question. Is a student visa a constitutional right or a privilege the government can revoke? The exchange quickly went viral. One side argued the administration punished protected speech by revoking a student's visa after she co-authored an op-ed. Rubio fired back that visas are discretionary under federal immigration law and that the Secretary of State has broad authority to revoke them when deemed necessary. The debate wasn't just about one student. It became a fight over where constitutional protections end and executive immigration power begins.
But that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Öztürk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities or a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Öztürk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
But is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible. That I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job. Who snatches her off the street?
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the Supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa because she wrote an op-ed.
Would you revoke? We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
The case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people.
Actually, it's not just about revoking. You actually, Secretary Rubio, excuse me, reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person to enter the United States.
That's a totally different process. That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
visas are a privilege.
Secretary
Rubio, deny them all the time, and we'll revoke them.
Revoked a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time is expired. That's your claim. That's not accurate.
What unfolded wasn't simply a political shouting match. It exposed two fundamentally different legal arguments. The questioning centered on the case of a Turkish graduate student whose visa was revoked after she co-authored an opinion article. The lawmaker repeatedly asked Rubio where the Constitution allows the Secretary of State to override First Amendment protections, arguing that the government's actions appeared to punish political speech. Rubio refused to accept that premise. Instead of debating whether the article itself was protected speech, he drew a distinction between constitutional rights and immigration benefits. His argument was straightforward. There is no constitutional right to receive or keep a student visa. Student visas exist under federal immigration law, specifically the Immigration and Nationality Act, which gives the executive branch significant authority over visa issuance and revocation. Every time the questioning returned to free speech, Rubio redirected the discussion back to immigration authority. The lawmaker insisted the government was effectively punishing someone for expressing an opinion. Rubio maintained that the issue wasn't whether someone could speak, but whether a non-citizen could continue enjoying the privilege of remaining in the United States under a student visa. That distinction is at the heart of the legal debate. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech, but courts have also long recognized that Congress and the executive branch possess broad authority over immigration decisions. Where those two principles overlap remains one of the most contested areas of constitutional law. The hearing then shifted to the student's arrest by masked federal agents. The lawmaker questioned why such tactics were necessary and argued that they created the appearance of government intimidation. Rubio distanced himself from the arrest itself, saying his responsibility was limited to visa decisions and that operational enforcement belonged to other federal agencies. When pressed about the use of face coverings, Rubio argued they protect officers from retaliation and threats. The exchange became increasingly tense as both sides talked past each other. The lawmaker focused on the broader message these enforcement actions send to students and political activists. Rubio stayed focused on the legal authority granted to the executive branch under immigration law. Another flashpoint came when refugee status was compared to student visas. Rubio rejected the comparison entirely, arguing that refugee admissions and student visas are governed by different legal standards and cannot be treated as equivalent. By the end of the hearing, neither side had moved from its position. One argued that constitutional freedoms lose meaning if immigration authority can be used to penalize speech. The other argued that immigration benefits have always depended on executive discretion, regardless of whether an individual engages in protected expression. Ultimately, the hearing highlighted a broader national debate. how should constitutional free speech protections interact with the government's broad authority over immigration? That question continues to be argued in courts, Congress, and across the political spectrum. What did you think of the exchange? Did Rubio successfully defend the government's legal authority, or did the questioning raise legitimate concerns about the relationship between immigration enforcement and free speech? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more political analysis and hearing highlights.